I'd like to ask Colin to come forward and present for the federal government at this time.
It's great to be here. I bring greetings on behalf of the Prime Minister Stephen Harper and the Government of Canada. You know, these are the type of projects that our government wanted to see happen during the economic downturn, and today I'm representing our Minister, Lynn Yelich, Minister of State and Western Economic Diversification. As Jim said, that 2 years ago our government came forward with our stimulus program to try to get the economy going, but make investments in our communities and provinces across this country to help jobs. And we were talking about projects that were on the shelf that they were waiting to try to do and looking for a partner. And this was one that was on the shelf for quite some time. And the previous councils had put monies in reserve to ensure that they could build a fund to do this.
As Colin just said, this is a project that we delight in higher levels of government, because all we have to do is show up with the checks, and the municipalities and the local districts do all the hard work, and also are a third partner. And it is really nice to see a project come to completion. It's a partnership between the three levels of government. We were here, as Mayor Garlick said a little bit ago. This is, Colin's an old hat at this. He's been around for a few years, but this is one of the first projects that I've got to see from the turning dirt with the shovel to blacktop and ready to drive on. So this is kind of neat for me. We've been involved with partnering with the federal government since 2008 on these stimulus grants and infrastructure money. It amounts to about $5.5 billion across the province, 36,000 jobs that have been spent or created through these programs. So not only do we certainly get the roads and the infrastructure built, but when times are tough, it puts a little money, hence the term stimulus funding, back into the economy, keeps people working, keeps machinery working. So those are all great things. I'm real pleased to be here. I think this is great. Living in Lumbee, and this is going to really improve the drive to Highway 97 for us. It'll shorten it up. I'm sure the people on West Cal Road are probably as delighted to see this day as anybody else, or more so.
For this project to happen, a whole lot of stars had to align, and what we went through was, after we got the stars aligned, was a whole year of pushing those stars back into line to actually get the project going. I really am pleased to see so many people here at this opening. I'm hoping what you'll do is take a walk around. The road won't be open for another hour or two, so you have an opportunity to walk up and down the road at least as far as to Point Sage Drive. After that, you'll have to stay on the pathway. One of the things you'll notice, as Mayor Garlick mentioned, the road is not 100% complete. We did push very hard to try and get the road open to traffic as quickly as we possibly could. So we have a few things, a few rough spots that we're still going to finish off. For example, you see the pathway here still needs to be paved. We do plan on painting this girder overhead, and we plan on covering it with some anti-graffiti coating so that we will get to clean it off in the eventual time that our high school grads want to make their mark. One of the things we did find was we had to get an awful lot of approvals from an awful lot of agencies, and we did have a huge number of challenges. It was very important, though. Our council was 100% unwavering behind this project the whole time. There were a few times when the project was actually on life support, even after we got all the funds together. Some of the technical challenges really were what we call challenges, and I'll talk about a few of those, and Forrest will explain some of the engineering challenges as well. We took a real hard look at the creek and the railway grade, and we said, well, what if we go over the creek and under the railway? None of the studies or reports had looked at that as an option. So I asked Forrest Kotzbach to run the profiles and see if we could make that work. And after a few days, he came back and said, yeah, we've looked at that. We think we can do it, but just barely. We thought we would only have to clear this road by the railway by 5 meters. We then had to get from this point where we're standing back up to College Way, and at no point were the engineers allowed to exceed 10% grade. While we built this bridge, we had to keep KPR operational at all times. We then had to deal with the stormwater. Where we're standing, we're actually below high water level for the creek, so we had to deal with a 1 in 200 stormwater situation. We had to deal with very tight timelines. The funding was absolutely wonderful to have, but it came with some very strict deadlines for completing the project. We also had to make sure we kept the neighbors out in the Sage Point subdivision happy, most of whom absolutely insisted that they were promised that this road would never be built in their lifetimes. We had to deal with the making sure we had lots of room for pedestrians and for cyclists, which we think we've done in spite of having some pretty steep terrain challenges and a limited right-of-way. Finally, we had to make sure that we kept the whole project on budget. One of the interesting challenges, as an example, and because of all of the different agencies and all of the different things we had to deal with, at one point we knew we had to clear the trees out just from behind you there to do the work in the creek. We had a very narrow fisheries window to do that. It's 1 month in midsummer. We had to do that in the summer of 2010. But in the spring, we didn't have approvals to clear any trees out. And our concern was we wanted to clear the trees out before all the woodpeckers would come and nest, because once they did that, we weren't allowed. Then we would have to wait until all the young woodpeckers would fledge. And we were hoping that that might happen when we got our fisheries window to actually go in and clear the trees. So we actually went through a whole lot of contortions, just barely short of Googling flying lessons for baby woodpeckers.
It's nice to see it all come together now. Mike alluded to some of the property impacts. We did our best to fit this in with the available right-of-way. Subsequent to the plans that were developed, a new neighborhood had gone in, and we worked quite closely not only with the residents but also with the seed orchard. One of the things we were able to do as part of this project was some of the excess material that was excavated here was used both with the seed orchard and Okanagan College to create some more usable space for them. So it was a win-win for everybody, where we were able to get rid of some material for a little less money and create some usable space. Mike talked about the railway. I invite everyone after this is done to come take a look at the boards. There's a photo, happens to be my favorite, of one of Bob's crews. There's a sheet pile wall here. This is before this structure was in place, and he's standing there working right adjacent to the train going by 6 meters above his head. It was quite a feat. And the other aspect that, now that it's done, you don't see is the tons of concrete and the amount of steel that are in each abutment. Again, all covered up, don't see everything that goes on there. One of the other things, utilities, Mike had alluded to the creek. We did have a fisheries window in order to construct the road crossing, but we also had to get some utilities. We worked with Greater Vernon Services to loop a water main through here, and we actually used trenchless technology or pipe jacking, where we pushed the pipes underneath the creek so we wouldn't disturb the creek. Mike had alluded to approvals, working with Transport Canada and Navigable Waters over Vernon Creek, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, Transport Canada, BC Environmental Ministry. There were a lot of things going on. And speaking of environment, Mike had mentioned the bird nesting, but the other things that we did as part of this project was, prior to CGL's crews coming through and starting work, is we did a snake salvage. So the snakes were all collected, rounded up, and moved out of the way before we tore through with the construction. So tore through is not a good word. As we began construction. And then finally fish salvage, when we were working in the creek, salvaging all the fish. And another one that I haven't encountered in my career before, but this is the first project where we worked with the Department of National Defense on coming up with a plan for unexploded ordnances. Given the history of the area during the war, there was a possibility we might encounter something, so we had to have a plan in place. So that was a new one. And then finally, time frame was a real constraint. And as Mike said, with all the funding deadlines, there were a lot of milestones. And Sheldon and I, on more than a few Friday afternoons, Mike would call and we're like, "You need what by Monday?" So in the end, I think it all turned out well. And in closing, would like to congratulate the district, Mayor Garlick and Mike, on a job well done. You've taken a project that's been decades in the planning, and in under 3 years taken that from concept to delivery. So thank you for allowing us to be part of that.
We'd like to unveil a plaque which is going to be mounted up on the side here on the concrete. And so this is for future.